Welcome to part 4 of tonight's Opportunity Zone Meetup. Tonight we're talking about opportunity zones as a mechanism for funding workforce housing and different models in which the employer plays a primary role in making this all possible. So in the last section we went through the basic model that has been proposed where the employer makes a series of commitments that serve to benefit and assure the investors an exit that will help them recruit workers for their workforce and provide potential conversion from rental to home ownership for the employees. So there's a variety of benefits for everybody that's participating in this that goes beyond an ordinary model that could make this very, very attractive to opportunity zone investors, but as we discussed, it may have a greater benefit, a non-monetary or an economic benefit to the community in which this program is implemented. And therefore, we may see public-private partnerships, we may see some foundation funding and other people trying to figure out how to play a role in this basic model and creating some better models. So at this point, I want to talk about a couple other ways that this might be implemented or altered or extended to give you some things to think about, and then we will adjourn and you can all go home. So one of the things we've looked at is called shared ownership. You also see equity sharing. There's a term that's used in the Stapleton project. The city of Denver retained ownership of the land, and so the property that was sold was only the building. And it was a situation that unfortunately was supposed to have limits or constraints upon resale that were never enforced. And the net result was people made windfalls and then sold the house, bought in, the property went up, they sold it, and that property was lost to this marketplace. Yet there's actually dozens of different equity sharing models that are out there. There's a lot of places where you can get information and see how this is done in different manners and different things. But one of the benefits, we looked at doing a housing project for artists, and rather doing a single residence, we were going to get like a 20, 30, 50 unit complex, and we were not going to transfer title to the tenants. We were going to hold it in common like a REIT or a cooperative type of ownership. And the idea here was that a person could rent a space. It was a controlled rent space so that every month the rent could only go up tied to cost of living. So you couldn't gentrify somebody out of this particular property in the short term, despite rising property values around them. But we were also going to bundle this with a security. So a portion of every single rent payment was also an investment in the ownership of the building, so that the person, every time they made a monthly payment, they were building value of wealth by getting a greater and greater share of the total value of the building. So you were seeing them pay rents, the rents were paying the operating cost, and then they were also making an investment in the building, which was serving to buy out the original investors and buy down the mortgage. So that at the end of a 20-year term, we did models of 10, 15, and 20 years because we wanted a long enough life to insinuate the artist into the community and make it part of the cultural norm for that community. But we got this model from Erickson, who does a lot of senior living stuff, where if you buy into them, you don't get title to your unit, you get a space in time. And they guarantee you that when you die or you leave, you get your money back. Okay, so you get 100% of your investment. You don't participate in appreciation. So what they do is when you die, they're assuming that you've been there a while and they can now resell that same unit to someone at a higher price, and that's part of their business model. So what we learned from that, though, was that every time a unit changed hands, there was no title examination, no appraisal, no broker fees. So that meant that this delta between the market price and all these costs associated with the transaction disappeared. So it actually, to their model, it made it work better, where if they were just running a condo, these things would be chewed up. And so from that, we're looking at doing this with an artist community, but it could also be a millennial community or a VA community or something. And what you're saying is, I'm going to let you buy into this as a security. And with crowdfunding, this is now doable, which you couldn't have done it before crowdfunding, because all these people are going to be non-accredited investors who are the tenants. And you just simply do a renewable crowdfunding campaign every year, 12-month cycle. And so they're making investments, and that's in their contract within the lease that they're both an investor and a tenant, and they're building wealth every month that they're there. If they decide to leave at the end of 3 years, they do have value in the building, and that can be transferred in the form of sale of their security. Or if we had a broader scale program where we had buildings in multiple communities, they could move from one location like they do in Erickson, and they simply change locations. There's no disconnect in their ownership or rights as such as it is, but they're continuing to move around. So at a larger scale, you'd want to do this where you can move all over the country. And Erickson, I think, has 37 retirement communities all over. And if you want to go to Philadelphia, you can move to Philadelphia if they have a vacancy, and you're just changing your address. The rest of your contract remains the same. Same thing here. So one of the ways to get into this is, instead of creating a whole bunch of individual houses or condos or apartments, is we'd simply wrap this in a model where it's a shared ownership in a common enterprise. And because you are an owner in this manner, you're building wealth, and it allows you to do the time vesting thing that we had a problem that we discussed earlier. One of the other things I mentioned is this isn't limited to new building. We're looking at this for fix and flips, and the Opportunity Zone laws place a constraint on this if we're using Opportunity Zone investment alone, because when you buy a property, you are required to make an enhancement to that property of an equal amount to the purchase price. So if you bought a property for $100,000, you have to put another $100,000 improvements into it in order for you to meet the requirement. And in some cases, that can't be done. That would push the value of the building outside the marketplace. It would overprice it in the community. It would have some other issues. So, but in some cases, it will work. You may find something where you can pick up the properties at one price, double what you put into it, and it's still in market. And you can do this in place. So we have one group working with communities of color. This is the business model we've been working on since December. And we may, in this case, match what we call Opportunity Zone money in a capital stack with community money. So we might do crowdfunding within the community, have them come in and play one role with certain money to do certain things, and then we bring in the Opportunity Zone money and have it play its role, which may also help us address the enhancement requirement. And between the two, we've got money that's coming in from outside the community, which serves the purpose of Opportunity Zones, but we're also trapping part of the profits from the appreciation of the property within the crowdfunded community fund at the same time. So this, we've been talking new build, but also this could work in fix and flips, but it gets a little harder because of that one requirement of Opportunity Zone law about enhancement. Now, for those of you, one of the footnotes we came across is if the building has been idle for 5 years, meaning it's been unoccupied, you don't have to do the enhancement. And we're finding a number of historic buildings that have been sitting in mothballed or degrading for a period of time where nobody's been in it, such as the prison in Brush has been empty for 9 years. The school we're looking at in Florence, I think, has been occupied for 12 years or 15 years. And there's actually a school in Brush that's been occupied for 40 years or something. And it's a mess, but that's another story. If you want to bid on that, I have all the paperwork. It's due. How much? It's an RFP open bid that's due, I think, October 1st or the 15th.
Where is it?
Brush, Colorado. Everybody knows it well. And if you do, yeah. Well, Nate knows it because it was a juvie facility first. But no, it's another story. But yeah, we're seeing this kind of situation. But it just wanted to make sure you understood there are, we could be looking at any kind of a building that would work as workforce housing. It doesn't have to be new build. It could be a converted warehouse or any number of other buildings, And as a consequence, you've got more options in here. The last point I wanted to make in talking with community officials about workforce housing is you've seen a lot of conversation recently about tiny homes and other alternative building because the current building codes are themselves contributing to the problem. When you go to I forget, I won't name the community, but I think the hookup for the community was $100,000, okay? And you're like, well, how am I gonna buy a house that somebody can afford if just the hookup to the utilities was $100,000, not counting the land, okay, before we got started? And you just blew it out of the market. So a number of communities are allowing a single hookup for a series of houses, which might be tiny houses or cottage houses or other types of houses. And they have to make special zoning things to enable this. But what they're trying to do is look at some of the infrastructure costs that's associated with this, take it out of the equation. The other thing we're looking at is factory housing, is moving away from a sticks and bricks, which is, you know, no matter how you do it, is a high labor intensive type thing, and moving it to a lower labor by bringing in either stand-up or prefab or any number of other things that are out there. The city of Loveland is currently doing a study with Minka houses on a thing that you can assemble in 24 hours. And I haven't checked the insulation on it yet, so you being from Canada, that is the first question. First thing you think about is, yeah, is there any R rating on that? Or is this what we call an open air system? and go from there. But no, they had a specific custom design, and it's a real quick thing. I think it's like 250 square feet. It's not a and this, I think that this is going to be one of the keys to getting there on big stuff. And the project we're looking at in Fort Collins, we're looking at fabricated housing to bring the cost down so that we can work towards these issues of down payment and affordability in the monthly rentals. So that's the three things I wanted to bring to your attention. If you have some other options on what might help with workforce housing, we've run out of time, so I'm going to just invite you to contact me, and we'll share that information with the group. And we are looking for a solution here, where this is what we see as one of the primary benefits that may come from Opportunity Zone funding, and we want to explore everything that can get that particular job done. And tonight is one solution that may contribute to that overall outcome. At the end of the slide deck, and again, because we're out of time, we won't get into this tonight, we have a resources section. Before we close for this evening, I want to go into resources. These are things that might help you work on your Opportunity Zone projects. There are a number we've been working with for a long time, but I've added a couple new ones that I think you'll find of value. And the first of these is the State of Colorado Office of Economic Development, International Trade. Janet Persky runs this program, and they are working very, very hard in the state of Colorado, and they were a leader in getting out there in front of Opportunity Zones. And they have a matchmaking page here where if you have a project or a fund, it actually doesn't have to be an Opportunity Zone project. Any project the state of Colorado qualifies, but it's focused on Opportunity Zones, you can go there and list it. And you have to be careful in what kind of information you use, because it's supposed to be informative, like a slide deck, gain their attention. It's not supposed to be closing the deal. Another place to go to is an interactive map of Colorado Opportunity Zones. They have one at the state site, but they were doing some rehab on it recently, and it was not working the way I wanted. I haven't been back in time to see it. But Ross Hare with ozcolorado.com has created his own site. He's pulling a lot of the information from a national level, and he's supplementing that information with other information which is useful if you're looking at trying to figure out where you fit into a particular zone. Hit that twice, my apologies. Go back one. As I mentioned, we record going all the way back to the second week of November. This is our 15, 16, 17, somewhere in there, event of this group. And we've recorded all of these. They're all up on YouTube. A few months ago, we started breaking them into parts so that you didn't have to watch for the full 2 hours and go from there. And it makes it easier to find it. But those recordings are all there for you to watch anytime. Just last week, a gentleman set up a new Opportunity Zone group on Facebook. There are several of us signed up. We'll see how this does, but it's similar to the purpose of this meetup group, which is to share information on Opportunity Zone projects. This is at a national level, so you may be able to find some information there that we don't have locally. There's a newsletter put out by the Medora Ventures group called Oz Guide. This is like a newsletter. They work very hard to go out and find projects and news items about opportunity zones. And you can go to this site and subscribe for free. And if you want to track this in more detail. And again, this slide deck, we'll try to get this out to you. Actually, I'll try to do it late tonight because I'm going to be out of town for the next few days. So you can just pull these URLs from the slide deck directly. And the images will be in there to make it that much more interesting. Finally, this is me. This is our meetup group. I also have been building a bit of a library of articles and different things in opportunity zones on my business website. And you can always reach out to me by email or by phone if you have any questions or anything's coming up. We're getting lots of good questions coming from people that are new or first time through this, and if we have an answer, we're happy to share it. And with Nate's availability this summer, we've got the ability to chase some of the harder questions and give you more detailed answers, or more detailed, we don't know what's happening on that issue, kind of a thing. So that covers the extra resources for tonight. So thank you all for coming, and look forward to each of you having a successful Opportunity Zone project. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Jesus!